Well, welcome everyone. We've just gone 12 noon Melbourne time, which means it's time to get into our Friday coaching cafe. Welcome everyone. This is Natalie Ashdown with you. And today we are looking at part 3 of our shifting underperformance conversations. So we've had part 1 and part 2. Obviously, you can pick those up off our website, off the blog posts on our website. And today we're finishing the 3rd part of our series. So I'm looking forward to a bit of a recap with you. So as I mentioned, we've had 2 other coaching webinars. The first one was on changing our mindset and our approach to performance and what we think about when we think about underperformance in the workplace, and we applied a couple of coaching tools there as well. In part 2, we actually introduced the performance coaching model. So quite a simple model that you can use to have performance coaching conversations. And thank you for all of those of you that have given us feedback around that. There's been some people who have actually gone out and tried it between last week and this week and have let me know that it works. So that's fantastic. And today we're picking up our 3rd part of our webinar, which is what do you do with those people who say that they just don't care? And what does a simple plan look like? So there's a few pushbacks we get around performance coaching in the workplace. So what do we do with that? As always, welcome back to all the regulars. It's great to see you all here again, and it makes my my Friday coaching cafe much more enjoyable when I say hello to you all before we begin. And also welcome to everyone who might be new to our coaching cafes as well. If you're new to Coaching Cafe, we are all about creating a community, sharing our learned experience, having thought-provoking conversations, and we do have a couple of laughs every now and again because it is live. So if you'd like to interact with me, I really enjoy that. You can do that by entering comments into the chat box, and I'll pick those comments up and those questions, I'll pick those up as we go along. And please, this really is about sharing your experience as well. So I learn as much about the topics as you do through you sharing. So very happy that you do that as well. Thanks to everyone coming on the line. I can see more people still joining us, which is great. If you are here because you'd like to pick up your continuing coach education units for your ICF credentials, you are in the right place. You just need to be on the line for the full 30 minutes, and we are sending those CCEs out complimentary. So there's no charge for it. If you actually need those, you can actually get them automatically. Fantastic. So hopefully my screen is scrolling forward. You can see the agenda for today, and I'm now jumping forward to our next screen. So this is just a recap about what we covered in our first 2, just a very quick recap about what we covered in our first 2 coaching cafes together around mindset and the performance coaching model, just giving a bit of a recap to set the context for what we're talking about today. So if you remember when we talked about changing our wording and changing our focus, this was around changing the wording. A lot of people that we hear in the workplace will say something like, well, what do you do with the underperformers? What do you do with people who are underperforming? I've got a person who's underperforming. Or I actually have heard people say, let's discuss your underperformance. And I remember the first time I heard that in a coaching program, because someone on the program was saying, well, I like to sit down and just be straight and say, let's talk about why you're not performing, or let's sit down and talk about your underperformance. And I remember it was that workshop that actually on the plane on the way home, I had a really, really good think about what was going on here and how we had to change our focus and our mindsets. And that's when I started to do reframing on this idea of underperformance. And this is what we discussed in our first webinar together, that we want to change the wording to, what do you do with people who need to shift, lift, raise, change their performance? So swapping those words out, any words you like, shift, lift, raise, this is the kind of wording we like to use. And we're talking about from where they are now to where they need to be. So I have a person who needs to shift, lift, change, raise their performance. How do we coach that person? Sit down with a person and say, let's discuss, I'd really like to sit down today and discuss how we shift your performance, how we lift your performance from where you are now to where you need to be. So this is the first thing that we were really focusing on in our webinars, around how do we get managers that we're coaching or people that we're coaching in the workplace to move their wording. And it does actually take a mindset change. I was in a workshop where I introduced this, and the person said, yeah, that really makes sense. So we're going to say, how do we help the person shift performance? So when we're talking about the underperformers, and so you could see the person jumped straight back into using the term underperformers to describe the people. And that's going to take a little bit of time to move that kind of thinking. However, it is a really great opportunity. The other thing that we talked about was actually changing our approach. So getting managers that we're coaching to move away from this annual event, lack of preparation, performance conversations being left to the end of the year, then they're going to be rushed. There's not much preparation. There's a bit of a lack of enthusiasm because people are really tired. And where those conversations are unplanned or they're rushed and they have to be rescheduled. And we want to go for a more scheduled, regular conversations with a dynamic plan, where the team members taking responsibility, where we're breaking down the conversation into manageable chunks, and that in then turn encourages communication and trust in the workplace, and using our coaching frameworks that we've been talking about all along. So this is really a movement away from what we don't want in terms of performance conversations, where it really is a lack of preparation and an annual event and a bit of a tick and flick process, to more of a what we really want to see, which is a continuing process throughout the year. Oh, that's a really great comment. Thank you, Peter. He says, just wondering, does the word performance act as a red flag to a lot of people? Can it shut them down? What are the other options there for wording, perhaps people's thoughts? Thanks for asking that. Yeah, what do you think, everybody? Jump in and pop some comments in the chat box there. So it's a bit like when we talk about feedback, do you mind if I offer you some feedback? So if I say, can I sit down and have a discussion around your performance, is that going to be a red flag? Does it shut people down straight away? Feel free to pop some messages in the chat box and let me know what you think. Yeah, Catherine agrees. She says, I agree. So alternative wording for even using performance, yeah. Anyone else got some ideas around that? Yeah, good point there, Catherine. So she says, if I was told I need to lift your performance, if I was told we need to lift your performance, I'd focus on the word performance and think, oh, what are you saying? Am I underperforming? Peter says, I know that in some schools I work with, as soon as the word is mentioned, there's a call to, oh, really? He says, in some schools he works with, as soon as the word is mentioned, there's a call to the respective union representative. Great word. Sebastian suggests the word contributions. So can we discuss your contribution? I like that. That's great. Yeah. Jody offers, maybe we talk about how you're working or how the work is going. So I'd like to really have a conversation around how you're working, how the work's going, the contributions you're making to the workplace. Yeah, they're great. Thank you. Thanks, Peter. I hadn't even thought about reframing the actual word performance. I was really focused on the word under. So that's been a great takeaway. Thank you. Excellent. I'm fortunate because I can pick up all the notes from the from the webinar afterwards, so I don't have to madly take notes. I can just pick them up and then incorporate them. So thank you. That's great. Yeah, please feel free to jump in with comments like that and any other thoughts you're having as you go along. Okay, so we're changing our approach, we're changing our wording, we're perhaps not using that word performance if that's going to create a red flag. And the red flag there is because we're using the word performance, it starts to shut people down, as Catherine suggested, and as Peter might have suggested as well. So a bit like the word feedback, using a different word so it doesn't create those defenses. Thank you. So today's focus, I want to move to these people that say, I don't care. So I call them the I don't care people, and looking at the performance plan. So this is where I'd like to open up a discussion with you as well. What about the people that when you're having performance conversations or you're doing these ongoing conversations around achievement of goals, etc. What about the people that just don't care? I have actually had people say to me in a workshop, look, this coaching's all very well, but let's face it, I'm only here for the pay. So I actually had someone in a coaching workshop, like a coaching 101 workshop, where they said, I don't really care. I'm here for the pay. I don't really set goals in the workplace because I've got a lot of things going on outside of the workplace, and I set goals for myself outside the workplace. So we were looking at the time, I remember, for a couple of goals, workplace goals that they could use to practice with, you know, to do the mini grow model or something like that. And I remember him saying, well, I don't have workplace goals. I've got plenty of goals outside the workplace. And so at the time I thought, let's just move on. We'll pick that up later. And at the time I just said, well, pick up any goal you like. It is just a practice. But of course I moved on for him just to keep the activity moving, because in the early sessions of in the early hours or the early first couple of hours of a coaching 101, I'm not going to go after the person, but it definitely, you know, put a red flag in my mind to come back to. So what if the person's only there for the pay? And I'm not talking about the people that are, you know, they're doing a good job. You know, they come to work, they do a good job, they get paid, they go home. I'm talking about the ones that are not performing and they're only here for the pay. What about the people who say, I don't care? So when you ask them about what their goals are, they say, well, I don't know, or I don't know what my goals are. I don't really care about my goals. What do you do with the people who say they will deliver, but then they don't? So there's a performance issue because they say they're going to deliver something, but then they don't. And you're continuously having to follow them up. And what do you do with the people who you've tried everything with? So this is normally where the question around can a person be uncoachable comes up. And the answer to this question, and have a think about what you think as well. Can people actually be uncoachable? What's your thoughts about that? Let me know what you think. Can they actually be uncoachable? This is where we often have the terms and conditions apply. So we are going to be trying to coach people and we're going to be using our coaching tools. You may also have to bring in your formal performance management processes here as well. So whatever is your formal performance management process in the workplace, you might actually have to bring that in. And Gillian says she thinks it's sad. So what do you think about people that are uncoachable? She says she thinks it's sad. Yeah. William says, in the short term, maybe, but over a longer period of time, I think they become coachable. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? So it's about the length of time that we might be chipping away. Yeah. Peter says, I think no, it comes down to the relationship, I think. Some people have huge barriers, for example, trauma, that causes them to fear intrusion. He says, work with them and build the relationship. Yeah, thank you. Sebastian says, another employee comments, I don't believe in it within this kind of organisation. Yeah, so that's an interesting one you might get to. You know, this coaching might be all, you know, hoo-ha, rah-rah, new fandangled stuff. I don't believe in it for this organisation. So that's another bit of resistance, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, great. Got some good discussion going on. Jody says, I think if someone really doesn't want coaching, I think we owe it to them to respect their process and gently bring them along and build trust. Yeah, so that's building the trust over time. Jenny says, it depends on if it's just a coaching conversation, like an everyday coaching conversation, or a formal coaching program. Yeah, that's a very good point, actually. Yeah. If it's a coaching conversation, it could just be using the coaching skills to facilitate their better understanding of themselves. So it depends if we're talking about a coaching outcome or just using our coaching skills. That's a really nice distinction. Thanks, Jody. And I appreciate everyone's comments that you're throwing in there. So I beg your pardon, Jenny. She says that so if it's a formal formal round of coaching, that might be slightly different from just taking everyday coaching approach in the workplace. Yeah, thank you. Catherine says for the ego. So it might be ego getting in the way. Yeah, I don't need coaching. That ego kind of gets in the way. Yes, that's true too. Yeah. Yeah, so for me, I always come back to that I don't think that people are necessarily uncoachable. I don't think anyone is uncoachable. I do think, though, as we know, that coaching depends on willingness. So it goes back to those comments that you've all made, the comments that Sebastian's made as well. Maybe not now, like maybe we're taking a slightly different approach with them now, but over time, we can start to coach them more and more. As Peter says, as the relationship, and Jenny says, as the relationship builds up and we build trust, as Jody says, as we build trust, where they might become more willing to have the conversations. So I don't think that anyone's uncoachable. I do actually think, for what it's worth, that they might not be willing. They're not willing. You get pushback to say, well, can't you just give me the answer? Why are you asking me all these questions? Just give me the answer. So they're not really willing to have a really good think about it and to answer questions. They just want the answer nice and quick. And we do see that, that kind of resistance when we go back into the workplace, especially after we've done a big coaching program or, you've been immersed in the coaching. Catherine says, Peter says, do you think it comes back to establishing a top-down coaching culture? If that's in place and the way we do things around here is embedded in the employee conditions, yeah, I 100% agree. Sounds like the topics of the diploma, doesn't it? So, yeah, so definitely establishing the coaching culture that comes down from the top. That means that the type of conversations we're having around here are accepted all throughout the hierarchy. Absolutely makes a massive difference for sure. Yeah. In the meantime, whilst we don't have that, we can still get on with our everyday coaching conversations. Yeah. Catherine says, for the person to say they don't want to be coached, then they are already going through a coaching process and realise they have a blockage. It will have an effect when they go home and they realise a lot of things. That is very interesting. Yes, thank you. So I'm understanding what you mean there, Catherine, by saying in order for them to know that they don't want coaching, they have to have realised something already. What you're doing is not what I need. So there's a process that's going on there. That's very interesting. Yeah, I could spend probably half an hour unpacking that with you. Thank you. You've really got me thinking. Yeah, this is great. So there's a couple of things that I think we can consider around people who are saying these things, and keeping in mind everything that you've shared so far. I'm thinking about the iceberg. I love looking at pictures of icebergs. So I've given you a couple of icebergs here as our options. So a couple of options for those people that say, I don't care, or they don't know what their goals are, or they're just in it for the pay. What I want to distinguish here is that this is what they say on the surface. So those of you that have, and a lot of you on the line I can see have been through our Certificate for and Workplace and Business Coaching program, you will know that we talk about in the later modules thinking about what people are saying on the surface and actually getting in underneath in terms of their beliefs, their values, their attitudes, reframing, etc. So I like to think about these things that they're saying as what's coming out, what we see on the surface. So on the surface, we see behaviours and we can hear what they're saying. But what I'm interested in is what's going on underneath. It gets back to what Peter was saying originally, that what is happening for this person, what brings them to this space. Maybe there was a trauma or some bad manager they had in the past or something like that. So I'm interested in asking some coaching questions here, that when they say, look, I don't care about performance, I don't care about goals, I don't know what I want to achieve, I'm just here for the pay. I want to get underneath and ask some questions about, well, tell me more about that. Tell me more about where that's come from. How long have you been thinking that? What makes you say that? There was a person that I asked this of a while ago now, and I said, well, what makes you say that? And they said, oh, blah, blah, blah. And I said, how long have you been thinking that? And the person said, oh, for years now. And I thought, wow, for years now. I'm not sure exactly how long the period was, but for a long time they've been thinking these things. I just thought, wow, for a long time they've probably only been bringing, 50-60% of their effort to the workplace, which is one thing from an output point of view, a performance output point of view. But what about the person in terms of them, as a human being, coming to work and being pretty, 60% engaged, or just going through the motions, as opposed to, feeling some kind of vigor or engagement or something about their work, passion about their work. And I remember talking about that once at a workshop, and someone going, well, you know what, we all can't be passionate about our work. Like, you're obviously passionate about your work. We can't all be passionate about our work. And I went to myself, why not? Like, why can't we all be passionate about our work? And we don't ask why questions, but how can we bring more of that to our work? How can we think about our work to bring out the best in people? So anyway, that set me thinking for a while. So what I'm talking about here, sorry for that little ramble, what I'm really talking about here is they say these things on the surface. What about getting underneath the surface and asking some really good questions? Jenny says that's right. Good coaches are meant to be curious, to explore, and to understand their coachee. Love that word, curious. Listening to them and understand why they're not engaged. So listening to them and understanding why they're not engaged helps further conversation. They look at the impact if they continue their current performance. That's a beautiful summary. Thank you. That's exactly what we're talking about. So we're listening, we're being curious, we're finding out why they're not engaged, and that actually helps further conversations and the impact if their current performance continues. Absolutely. So getting under the surface there. Sebastian says, what about talking about the coaching benefits we received ourselves while approaching coaching with the employee to encourage positive recognition and acceptance? Yes, that's a really nice way of thinking about it too. So I can share how I've benefited from coaching. That's why I'm taking a coaching approach with the people that I'm working with. So yeah, that's a nice approach as well. Thank you. Jump in what you think about this, getting under the surface here. What questions might you ask? What else might you ask? I asked the question, how long have you been feeling like this? What other questions would you like to throw in here? Pausing for a couple of minutes, let you get your rigorous typing going on. Yeah, thank you, Jodie. That's a great question, a great statement as well. She says, we also need to be clear that we're suspending judgment. Yeah, one of our real coaching principles, isn't it? Suspending judgment. People go to work for different reasons, and they may not have the opportunity to work in an area of passion due to their pragmatic circumstances. Yes, so you're right. We're not all going to be woo, 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 I'm so passionate. So, depending on their work, particularly we see that in some organisations where there's been posting cycles or people are moved from one role to the next role every 18 months or every couple of years, it might not be that they're in a job now that really fires off their imagination and all the passion that they've got. So let's suspend judgment. I agree with you. They go for work for different reasons. It might not necessarily be a passion, but they're doing that for different reasons. So you're right. What I'm looking for here, I think, is if it's impacting their performance, then can we ask a few more questions, not to judge them, but as I said, I like that idea of being curious. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, Peter says, ask them other questions like, what previous experience have you had with coaching? Maybe they've been coached in inverted commas, but it wasn't good coaching and they've actually been burned. Well, that's a powerful question. Jenny says, so how do you feel when you spend 5 days a week on something you don't care about? That's getting to the heart of it, isn't it? So how does that make you feel? Not coming to work and being super passionate. And based on that, how can you start thinking about it in a different way? Or you could ask a few more questions off the back of that. Peter says maybe a few sessions of career coaching would break through. And Kim, yes, has offered also that maybe they feel they've not been heard before. I think you're right there. I think a lot of that actually goes on. I have experienced that people have tried in the past, like they've tried in the past to bring up ideas, to bring up options, to bring their creativity, and somewhere along the line they've been squashed down or they've continuously been squashed. So they don't care anymore. Like, what's the point? What's the point of me bringing up ideas to fix this workplace or do things if people don't care anymore? Oh, excuse me. I pulled out my headphones as quick as I can before that sneeze came. Bless you. You heard it. Thanks, Kim. It's a real hay fevery day today. So, yeah, thank you. They feel like they've not been heard before. Gillian suggests do a strengths exercise. Yes, I definitely agree with you. Strengths exercise here is a great idea. Bring your strengths coaching into it. Peter, great comment as well. Thank you. He says, would a needs analysis conversation raise some flags, or for us, would a needs analysis conversation? Actually, we are redesigning the needs analysis conversation. So for those of you that have done Happy, Sad, Happy with us, we're changing that now to actually bring in the performance coaching conversation model. So we're going to start not calling it performance conversation model. You can still do it for performance conversation, but the model I showed you, we're bringing that in for needs analysis. So I think I agree with you. Doing needs analysis, asking, what's going well, what are your strengths, where are you experiencing challenges, how can you move forward on those challenges, how can I assist you to move forward? All of those great questions. Thank you. Thanks. I'm really enjoying the interaction. So the other option I have here is around icebergs, is the cracks, where the cracks start to appear. So we're looking here at, they say that they'll deliver and then they don't. So over a bit of time, cracks start to appear in people's performance. So I think that's where for me, and tell me what you think here, but for my thinking, this is where we bring in some feedback conversations early. So as soon as we can, we start to bring in the feedback conversations. We start to talk about what options do you have now to move forward because that wasn't delivered. So what does it look like now? What are the goals? And putting in place a plan. So making sure that the plan and the milestones and the goals are fairly neatly laid out, I think is a good opportunity here when we start to see the cracks in the ice. So before we get this big crack that you see in the picture here and a big breakaway in terms of performance, what can we do there? Jenny says, if we can, how about this one? Other questions you can ask. If we can put you in a role that interests you and engages you more, what would that role look like? So, if we were to wave a magic wand over this and put you in a role, or if a miracle was to occur and you were in the role that you really wanted to be, that you were interested in and engaged, what would that role look like? What a fabulous question. Thank you. She says, what would you prefer to work on instead? What a great question. Thank you. Peter says, what's the most important thing to you that we should be talking about right now? Fantastic question. I love it. Yeah. I could just generate new questions all day. I just love it. They're really great. Jody says, in workplaces where competency is highly valued, people may feel really concerned about admitting that they don't know something or how to do something. Yes. So what additional knowledge do you need? How can we support you? What are the gaps, barriers? And Jody, what's your approach to that? Is it just building rapport, building trust, so they start to talk about what they need in terms of knowledge? Let me know what you think there. Peter says, can we get a copy of these questions? They are great. I'm thinking exactly the same thing. Yes, I can capture them all from the chat and I'll stick it up as a blog. So yes, let's do that. Yeah. It's so great, isn't it, to have this extra arsenal of questions, and we can ask one or more of them as we go along. Absolutely. Yeah. Jody says, yes, it's about building trust and making sure that the conversations are private, confidential, not where others might hear, so the person doesn't feel too exposed. Yeah, thank you. You're really looking after the person from that point of view. The conversations are confidential. You're not exposing them in a team meeting, for example, and they don't feel exposed, so they're able to share with you. Emma says, what happens when the manager knows the person doesn't want to be there, but it's not brought up in the feedback conversation? They might still be performing, but their attitude is horrible. Yes, I've seen examples of this as well. So the manager knows that they don't want to be there, but it's not brought up. Well, what do you think, everybody? My approach to that is basically putting the elephant on the table. Like, eventually, unfortunately, it might be you, but somebody somewhere along the line has to open up the conversation, don't they? Otherwise, it's just going to continue. Yeah. So that takes a bit of courage, doesn't it? And it takes courage to bring that conversation up and to have that conversation. But if not, you've inherited the monkey and it's going to continue. Sebastian offers, what about saying, well done for X, you've achieved using great skills of blah, blah, blah. How can you make this extra Y%? What do you need to make it complete or to fulfill this task? So so he's saying, well done for X. How can you build on that for the next piece? What do you need to make it more complete? Great coaching questions. Thank you. Emma says, great, thanks. That's what I'm telling them to do, but I thought I'd check in if there's a better way. The better way is to actually use your feedback conversations. And I know it's extremely difficult. I still think that putting it on the table eventually. The other thing is also, don't forget in feedback conversations that some people might not know. They might never have really had this conversation. And so that's where we're putting it on the table to have the conversation and the discussion. Otherwise, it's just going to continue, isn't it? Particularly if their attitude's horrible, you can call on things like the company values. So how is that attitude that you're demonstrating, or how is that behavior that you're demonstrating in those meetings in line with our company values of, point to it on the wall, respect, communication, teamwork, So I'd come back to the company values in that instance as well. Oh, here's another good one. What happens if the person knows they're not delivering, but they've seen similar cases where a person's not delivering, but there was no negative consequences, hence their whatever kind of attitude? Thank you, Jenny. I think same approach. What we're trying to do here is not have them bring something else in. So they might say, but what about Bob? You haven't spoken to him. And to that, I would say, I want to talk about your performance, how we move you from where you need to be to where we need to get to. Let's focus on you and what you can do to move forward. Yeah, but you have to speak with blah, blah, blah. They get away with it. And you can just, I like to shut that conversation down and just say, I'm having conversations with everybody about where they need to be. And today I want to focus on you, or how you can move forward, how you can bring the values of respect and teamwork, whatever that might be. So I'm keeping it contained to the person, using feedback conversations that are specific to the person. Yeah. Good question, Peter says. Change the culture around them and have meetings that we spend, change the culture around them and have meetings where we spend lots of time talking about the great things that are happening and where we're going. Subtle pressure and ongoing positivity when a conversation with a person about how they feel about things that are being talked about. So you chip away at it, yeah. So just keep bringing it back to where we're heading to, what it would look like, etc. Yeah, yep. Catherine says, I think showing that we accept their repulsion in being there could help build trust. Yeah. So let's acknowledge it. Let's acknowledge that there's been a number of things that have brought them to this point. Let's acknowledge that. And then let's have a discussion about what that means and just accept it. And then you might, over time, have a conversation about how they move forward. Yeah. Jenny says the value questions can work well because they might have higher values that don't align with their current behavior. Okay, fantastic. So you're digging in deeper there as well. So they might have values that don't align with their current behavior. They might not even be aware that their behavior or their attitude is not aligning with their own values or not aligning with the company or the organizational values. So chipping into values there, getting under the surface is a good opportunity. And Jody says, also helpful to have team conversations where we help people see how their work contributes to the larger organizational goal and to others' works. So it's very important, actually. There's a lot of research on linking individual goals through to organizational goals as a mediator for creating engagement in the workplace. So there's lots of research on that. I do agree with you, Jody, and it is backed up by academic research that people need to know how they contribute to their organizational goal. They need to know how they make a difference so that they feel valued and engaged. So thank you for sharing. Peter says, great one, Catherine. How would you word that intro? So Catherine has said, I think showing that we accept their repulsion in being there could help build trust. So how might we word that? You can jump in there. Jody says they may also have a different interpretation of the values of, beg your pardon, they might have a different interpretation of the values of the behaviours that the values represent. So that's a very good point. We always talk about, well, these are the values. What do those values actually mean? How do we show them? How do we demonstrate them as part of, what are the behaviours that are aligned to those values? What are we going to see in the workshop, in the workplace that demonstrate those values? What behaviours are going to demonstrate those values? Yeah, thank you. Sorry, that was a long-winded way of just stating what you just said then. Sorry about that. Jenny says, thanks for addressing our comments so attentively. Yes, I'm more than happy and welcome to, because it's such an interesting and engaging topic. So I'm glad that we're able to do this together. Yeah. So I'm conscious of the time. I am going to be here, so you can feel free to pick up the end of this coaching recording if you like. We always record the conversations, but let's keep going if you're happy to. Catherine says, being attentive and just making it as a casual conversation at the beginning. So being attentive to how they're feeling and perhaps being more casual in the way that we open it up. Thank you. And Peter says, if we worked hard to attach behaviours to each value, what it looks like, what it sounds like, what it feels like, there's not a huge amount of wriggle room for misunderstanding, and it's a great basis for every conversation. Yeah, thank you. That's a lovely summary. We do have to work hard on it though, don't we? So I think I often talk about the unwritten rules or the unwritten behaviours, and sometimes there's behaviours that are unconscious or not brought to the surface. That if we were to bring them to the surface brings conscious awareness to those behaviours and whether they align to the values or not. So unwritten rules, unconscious behaviours, we want to start picking those up. That's very good coaching. Yeah. Sebastian, good pickup as well. He says, as emotions drive behaviour, shall we dig into their emotions about how they feel and why? And try to work backwards from a desired behaviour and how they're likely to feel about it. Thank you. Yeah. So let's talk about how they feel and why, working backwards, thinking about the desired behaviour and how you might feel having that desired behaviour. Catherine says, I wonder how to report to the manager when we're not sure we've been able to coach as well as we would have wished. Now, that is a whole topic of conversation. So that comes back to confidentiality, reporting, etc., etc. So hopefully you will have had that conversation at the beginning. If not, then I highly recommend that you're having that conversation with the coachee before you launch into, well, we need to talk to your manager about this. So yeah, that's a big topic too. Jody says, back to our values conversation, it's also about values, written or unwritten. It's also about it's also about what values, either written or unwritten, are supported by which behaviours and which behaviours are rewarded or ignored. And you're absolutely right, there's lots of potential questions there. So which values are supported by which behaviours, and are those behaviours rewarded or ignored? And they can be unwritten or written. Lots of potential questions. I 100% agree with you. This is great. I was hoping that we would be able to have these conversations, like we'd be able to bring out all your insights. It's wonderful. Thank you. Peter says, asking them about the results that they're hoping to achieve and then working back to the behaviours needed and the dissonance between the current ones that can work. So yes, looking about what they're trying to achieve, whether the behaviours that they're demonstrating now are helping them achieve those results. So, where depth comes into it for me there, using the WDEP model comes into it. How is what you're doing getting you what you want? How is it taking you in the direction that you want? For sure. So just to round off, the other thought we had here, it is about putting a plan in place. Here's a simple template. I am very big into simple templates that can help us move forward. Just get a Word document, put a table together, write out what the key deliverables are, what's going to happen each week. I really believe in getting the person who it is we're talking about, it's their performance, so get them to write up the plan. If they are writing up the plan, then they take responsibility. They have to that process of physically writing it, thinking about it, putting it in plain English that they can understand, like that actual process of, well, what am I going to write here? All of that starts to help their engagement. So anything we can do to get them to physically write the plan and make it nice and simple, I'm a real advocate for. There's been workplaces that I've worked in where the manager writes the plan. We talked about that in our first webinar as part of this series, I was told that the reason why the manager writes the plan is because the employees don't have the level of access they need to the software system. To which I just went, well, how can you get them the access? Oh, well, they can't have access because of blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, okay. so there was a systems thing that was stopping the right people to have access to their own performance plans and writing their own plans. So they thankfully went away to have a think about what they could do there from a systems point of view. But it was a software that was getting in the way of what I think was a much better practice. So anything we can do to keep this plan simple, to have the employee write it, I think we're better off for as well. Great. Well, it's been a fantastic discussion, everyone. There's been lots of takeaways. I will capture these questions that we've talked about. I think it's really valuable. Thank you. Think about actions. Join us for our next webinar. I don't know what the topic is. I'm sure it'll be great. Contact us if you've got any other thoughts. And for those of you that might be interested, we are now delivering mental health first aid. We really think it's an important thing to be talking about in the workplace, and it's important to understand our role as coaches and where we can continue to provide people with support from a mental health first aid point of view. So there's lots of great conversations and discussions we can have around that. You can go and find out about that from our website. A couple of last comments. We covered that one, Peter. Thank you. Jenny says, thank you for another great session. You're more than welcome. This is off topic. One of the comments reminded me if we will have a webinar series on confidentiality and ethics dilemmas that we face as coaches. Yes, we actually do have an ethics, confidentiality, ethics in coaching. We've got 2 webinars around that. I can't remember if they've already been held or if they're coming up. I'll double check that for you. Yes, it would be really useful. And it covers off also if you're looking for CCEs, so the continuing coach education, you do have to have had continuing coach education focusing on ethics. So we are covering that off for you as well. So killing 2 birds with the 1 stone there. Yep. You're welcome. Totally great. Yeah, it's very interesting. It's great to have a lot of people on the line for that conversation as well, because we really get the great discussion going around ethics. And wow, can we go down some rabbit holes? Yeah. Yep. Fantastic. Well, as always, if you are listening to this live on a Friday, happy Friday, everybody. It is happy weekend to you all. Thanks, Jody. Happy Friday to you. If you are listening to this just not live, but, as you're doing whatever you're doing, enjoy your coaching. I hope I really feel we've given some thought-provoking conversations today. So keep up with the chat, or keep up with the great coaching. Peter's reminded me not to forget to blog the questions. I will do that. And you're welcome. He says, thanks for an awesome webinar. So thank you, everyone. Enjoy your coaching. Enjoy stretching your coaching, having a think about these topics. Thanks for your contribution. I look forward to catching up with you on our next webinar. I will say goodbye for now.